Okay, Mandy. By the way, that was in English, so I don't know
I
about the
know.
car. You have less of an excuse.
You're accessing a kind of a sore spot, I think, for some commercial real estate agents and agencies in particular. That was my first time in Bath ever. And from the moment I got here, I was like, wow, this is a very unique place. The density of the downtown, the fact that it retained its historic fabric, it felt like a little bit fairy tale. Like, I'm just sold on this place and this idea and starting a co-working space in a community that I think is very cool. I'm not sure if it's going to be successful, but why not?
How close did you actually get maybe to,
Yeah.
I don't know about this, let's cut our losses.
We used to give some tours and people, I think they just thought, Sean particularly and me were just crazy.
Last week, didn't you have a closing?
Yes, I had a closing yesterday as well. So it's funny because last week we closed on a business. My clients were selling their business. I don't think it's public yet, so I'm not going to say. But
Of course.
and then this week I had a closing on a residential home. So my clients were buying a home in Bath, actually, and my business is really relationship driven, and that's why I'll kind of go wherever I need to for my clients. And it's hard, but it's really interesting. I learned so much, particularly in commercial real estate, but residential is a different skill set, and it's a different mindset, but it's you still learn just as much each time.
And I didn't know you did the residential as well. Like, is that just as you comes up with a relationship because it's not the focus for you, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I started out in commercial, which is uncommon, frankly. So when I got my real estate license, I really got it because I started working with a real estate developer in the area that mostly did sort of strip center retail kind of projects, which isn't my interest necessarily, but I learned a lot. And so in that, I was like, I should probably learn more about real estate, and got my license. And, I've had people over the years just be like, can you help me buy a house? I'm like, yes, I can help you, because there's no separate designation for commercial versus residential. So, it is a different business, certainly. But I feel like my background in commercial really is related to, I have a lot of experience doing due diligence, helping people figure out, zoning and code related intricacies in different communities. And it's a new challenge every day. I've sold everything from a business to a warehouse to, small sort of commercial buildings in West Bath. So it really runs the gamut. And that's kind of what keeps it interesting. So,
And I'd seen that, your career path was like mostly on the commercial side.
yeah,
I want to ask one thing is like the commercial versus the residential.
Yeah.
I mean, you said you did both, but it's typically different people?
Yes.
And then is there like a different type of person that does one versus the other, would you say?
That's interesting. I mean, well, I'm not like shattering anybody's sensibilities here by saying it's mostly men in commercial real estate. There are more women now than I think when I started 8 years ago, ish. I don't really know exactly what date. But it's definitely more men in commercial real estate. Just similarly with banking and finance, it's more men. And those are things that I'd like to see change, particularly in Maine, but everywhere. And, I think people think of residential real estate as being sort of more emotional than commercial. Like commercial is all about the numbers. Well, I don't Yeah, I mean, some commercial deals, it is all about the numbers. You're working with an investor and they have to hit a certain return and that's how they're going to evaluate a property. But most of the people that I work with are small business owners and people that are trying to grow and develop their own real estate investment portfolios and they're people. And so they fall in love with a property or, you know, a space or something, you know, that really speaks to them. And so saying it's just emotional in residential is just a fallacy. It's always emotional because your real estate is really just people navigating those relationships. And I mean, buildings are a lot like people. They're a work in progress. There's always something wrong with them. And, you know, we're always trying to improve, maintain, you know.
Especially when you're working with a historical building, like I know you guys did, and I want to get into that. But first, maybe a quick rewind just to get some background. Are you from Maine originally?
Yeah, I grew up in Berwick, Maine, which is right on the border of New Hampshire. I, went to public school, kind of moved back and forth between Maine and New Hampshire. My dad lived in New Hampshire, my mom in Maine. So, the seacoast area is it's not a weird place. It's a great place, but like the border doesn't matter. People sort of go back and forth all the time, like on a daily basis. And, when I got a cell phone in high school, I think I was a senior, I got a 603 number, which, the further north you move in Maine, the more questions you get. But, it didn't matter, right? Like that border, it was really just that region rather than Maine, New Hampshire. So, growing up, I did well in school and I knew I wanted to go to college. My parents hadn't, but, people in my family encouraged that. And so I applied to, I think 12 schools and then I thought I wanted to leave Maine, but I ended up getting accepted at Colby College and just fell in love with it. And, freshman year was difficult. I think, being from Maine and going to one of the small liberal arts colleges, it's like not going to private school. Really, I used to think like the folks in my high school whose parents were wealthy in our, sphere worked for themselves. They owned their own business, and then when I got to school, the level of wealth was just a completely different situation. And I was totally unprepared for it. It was a culture shock and it took me a while to find my people, but I ended up playing rugby and that was great. And, I made it through.
Yeah. I saw you did rugby. I also saw, cause I was doing some sleuthing last night. Did you do like a study abroad? Was it in New Zealand?
It was in New Zealand. Yeah.
So I didn't get to do a study abroad. I'm obviously a big traveler.
Yeah.
I didn't because I played football at university.
Yeah.
And it's a year-round sport.
Right.
But Paige did. A lot of my friends did. And I feel like most people I've met that did a study abroad, they had some sort of like big life-changing experience that helped them get out of the bubble. Was that the same for you?
Yeah. It really was more about the people that I studied abroad with than the place. Though the place was amazing. And, I don't even remember the classes that I went to, frankly. Like, it didn't matter. It really didn't. And what mattered was, meeting people and exploring that place. And it was just phenomenal. I haven't been back. It's quite a flight. But I was there for, I think, 5 months total. And the last month, traveled around the South Island and then did 2 weeks on the North Island because I was based at the University of Otago at Dunedin. And the experiences that I had there were very confidence building. It was like we bought a car, didn't have headrests, which I didn't realize was illegal. We had the high beams on most of the time that we were there because didn't know how to turn them off. Mm-hmm. And it would overheat pretty much every trip. So we spent a lot of time on the side of the road, a lot of jugs of water in the back. You know, it was like those kinds of experiences while trying at times. I mean, you know, to be in your early adulthood and have that kind of freedom and experience was just really liberating. So yeah, it was phenomenal. I did skip a rugby season for that one. So yeah, went in the fall, but met one of my best friends and, you know, still friends to this day. And yeah, it was quite an experience.
Mm-hmm. It's always interesting. I love talking about to people like with their first big travel experience or something like a study abroad, because like wherever you're from, it's from a bubble, right? Like even if you do move around within the U.S., like that's a bubble of a sort, right?
Yeah.
And then the second you step out of that, especially if you're doing it with like an open-mindedness, like a willingness to be curious, the little things that you remember of like, okay, Mandy, by the way, that was in English, so I don't know about the car. You have less of an excuse, but
I know.
But these little things that just, you would never face like these little types of problems, and you just have to like learn a completely different new skill set and way of life.
Yeah.
And being confronted by that of like people live so differently.
Right.
And I have to figure this out. And I can, like people live there. I can do it too.
Right.
I always love to hear like those stories. And I feel like it's, yeah, pretty much everybody I've met that study abroad has been, you know, they always loved it. Didn't regret it, even if they had to make a big decision, like not doing rugby.
And the opportunity to travel, you know, it's something that not everybody gets a chance to do. And I feel like that's a really, it's really important to take advantage of that if you can, you know, and I think schools make it, you know, barring sports, which have become like a full-time job for college students. You know, I think it's something that I wouldn't be able to replicate. Or, you know, I would have to make a lot of sacrifices to replicate. So that was great. It was a great experience.
And then you get into the kind of commercial real estate world after this, right?
A bit of a time, yeah. So after college, I actually graduated with a degree, and it's called Science, Technology, and Society.
Okay.
And essentially it's just liberal arts. And it was, I really chose that field of study based on the professor that was the chair. I ended up TAing for him, and really his tack on that was the history of science. And so the scientists themselves, but also, you know, the context and what was happening around the science. And, you know, it was just so interesting to me. And I really got to kind of choose my own adventure that way through that major. And so afterwards, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just kept applying for internships, and I was, you know, every year, every summer, I went back home and worked in a restaurant, and it was the way that I could make enough money to then live throughout the year. And, you know, so I didn't get a lot of summer internships, like particularly ones that didn't pay, and you know, it wasn't even on my radar really. And then, you know, senior year rolls around and you're like, oh geez. So I ended up getting an internship in Boston, and it was with a nonprofit based in the UK that focused on socially responsible investment research. And it was very new to me. I had never considered anything sort of in finance or finance adjacent. And really, it was a research role. So I was looking at companies that I was doing SINS research. So one of our clients was the Church of England, and they wanted to know about companies that produced alcohol, tobacco, firearms, cluster munitions, you know, SINS. And it wasn't, I can't say that it was really interesting work, that particular element, but got me involved in this industry of, you know, we have traditional finance, but then there's a whole group of people really based first and foremost on religion, based within their faith, that they've decided that they're going to make financial decisions based on how they view the world. And I thought that was super interesting, and really important given all of the issues that we're facing. So, I don't consider myself particularly religious myself, but I really took to this sort of field and ended up getting a job with them, and went to London, 2 weeks later. It was great. Really interesting experience. So I was based in the Boston office, moved to Boston. I didn't like Boston, but that's here nor there. We had a very small office. So we were based in the nonprofit center, and it was 5 people. And, it was difficult not being in a big office to meet people in that city. And so ultimately, I got this job. I worked for them doing environmental, social, and governance research, ESG research, which since has become like a hot button issue. But it's like, I don't really understand why. But in any case, I was doing that research right out of college, like 2013. And I was focused on companies that were involved in oil and gas and chemicals and real estate investment trusts. And I had some high risk sectors, and it was really interesting to, go through their proxy statements and 10Ks and corporate social responsibility reports, and just sort of understand more about how corporations are trying to, portray the company and focus on this. It was really enlightening listening to ExxonMobil's investor call on oil sands. Yeah, like the way that people are able to speak about issues differently. Yeah, I'm not sort of circling this right, but it was a great experience. So anyway, I move on from the ESG research into our human rights related research. And so that was a different sort of subset of the company. It was the foundation that was doing this research. And we looked at companies that had operations in Sudan for divestment purposes. So there was a divestment movement that happened around, I think, 2005 to 2008 region. And 22 states at one time had divestment legislation that essentially said that their public pension funds would not be invested in companies that had operations in particular countries, and one of them was Sudan. And so learned a lot about human rights, and but part of this, the undercurrent in this job the whole time, was that it was a fully remote job. And so ultimately I was able to work from home at a time when no one really worked from home. And I could travel, and I could, work from a coffee shop and work in. And so I started to get more familiar with co-working spaces and places that were, non-traditional workspaces. And ultimately, I kept this job probably a little too long, and really felt the call back to Maine. And so because it was a remote position, I was able to just commute a couple days a week. So I moved to Portsmouth and then made the jump to Portland. And I had never lived in Portland before, but that was around 2015. And so, yeah, it was a really flexible position. And I think maybe I took a little bit too much advantage of that. But ultimately, one of the things that I recognized about myself during this time period and before was that, I have I need to be doing more than one thing at one time. And that goes for professionally and personally. And I have always thought of myself as a multitasker, but maybe it's a little bit more clinical than that. It's, while I was working in Boston, I was working in a restaurant nights and weekends. And then, I would even come back to Maine to work at the restaurant that I used to work at while I had a full-time job. And I didn't need to, but it was part of, who I am. I wanted to make more money, wanted to make different connections and be with those types of people. And, so throughout, my new career, I was still trying to do more than one thing. And when I moved back to Maine, I had this itch. I had to get more involved in the community because, staring at your computer all day is not good for anyone, particularly when you're at home on your bed or, in an office by yourself. When you go 3-4 days without actually talking to another human, it's a problem. And even 3 or 4 hours in my case. So, it was great moving back to Maine because I had a great group of friends, but I really needed more professional ties here. And so, I ultimately started volunteering for this organization called Build Maine. It's a conference that happens every year, and the point is to bring together all of the people in the act of building Maine cities and towns, and developers, architects, engineers, municipalities, transportation planners, and really anyone that's interested in those fields. And it's a very demonstrative conference. There's demonstrations on traffic calming and different ways to, do things cheaply, parklets and elements that really can make you feel more at home in a city or a town, I think. And so that was my first sort of entree into real estate at all. I really had never thought about doing or really never cared about real estate before. And until I started understanding, this is, the built environment is, it impacts every person every day. And most people don't see it or feel it, So I think that was the turning point in my career. I started to sort of get more interested in real estate, started working with this developer, and then got my license. But I still had my job. So, I will say that I was quiet quitting for a couple of years. But I appreciated the time that I had at that company because it allowed me to buy my first home, and it allowed me to sort of understand. It's a field I don't dabble in anymore, but human rights issues are important to me, and I just needed to focus a little bit more close to home. So
I'm sure when you're getting into it, you just see a lot more behind the curtain that nobody else does because we just want to take it for face value, right? And we know probably something isn't what people are saying,
right?
But until you're confronted, it's the same with travel, right? When you travel to a developed nation and you see it firsthand,
right?
What true poverty looks like,
right?
Okay, you start to understand a bit more, and I'm sure it was maybe similar in that. And now I can understand a little bit more because one of the things that we'll get into is why you started the co-working because it was before the big boom, and having your own experience is always powerful. You said you went to some other ones. Do you remember your first co-working experience?
Actually, I think it was one in New Jersey, in Hoboken. And it was interesting because there was no one else there, which is an experience that I've had at many co-working spaces.
Yep.
And it's not the reason why you go to a co-working space. And so I definitely understand and identify with that. Like it was tough at the beginning to feel like there was an actual community, and not just feel like, you're jumping on the person as they walk in the door. But I think the most impactful co-working space that I've been to is actually Cloudport in Portland, Maine. Josh is a good friend, and it's a really unique community that changes and grows, and it has done for the last, I don't know, I think they're at least 10 years old. But I really loved my experience at Cloudport, and was like, I think that was the most consistent workplace that I had ever been to. Like when I moved back to Portland and was still working this job, I got a flex membership at Cloudport. And really that helped me get more involved in the Portland community and sort of build my real estate, not directly, it feels more indirect, but it like was a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. You've worked for so long by yourself and you're like, I got to get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think especially maybe for somebody that early in their career too, because even now, like remote work is a lot more prevalent. And towards the end, after engineering, I transitioned to kind of like a head of remote role and was going to remote work conferences.
Yeah.
The best remote work companies in the world, right? And cutting edge research. And after like the first year or two where it exploded, what you really saw was the younger the person, the more they wanted to be in the office.
Right.
Because they want the social. Like they've never been around the people they work with. They're looking for a new community. Maybe they moved. They're in a different phase of life. You do learn through osmosis a little bit of like, oh, this is how I behave in more of a professional setting.
Exactly.
That stuff does have value. And that's actually when you look at the stats, like most younger people do want to be in an office for those reasons. So I can definitely picture that. And that sounds like a pretty pivotal moment for you to prelude to some later stuff. But before that, I want to ask you about something, because so the other day I kind of confirmed, like, for real estate right now as an agent, you do work as a contractor for a company, right? But that you told me how it is still kind of entrepreneurial because you're doing your own thing and everything like that. Do you think like being in real estate and commercial, maybe especially or both, does that, because of that fact, like lend itself that much more where people want to have something themselves?
Yeah, it's interesting. And you're accessing a kind of a sore spot, I think, for some commercial real estate agents and agencies, in particular. So, when somebody wants to buy or sell, they come to a broker, and that broker may evaluate the deal and say like, wow, this is a great deal. Like, I should buy this. Do you want to compete with your broker? No. A lot of people would say no. But I also think that in that struggle, there's this element of like, I mean, you have to trust. I think that's the reality. It's like you have to trust that your broker has your back, and I think the point that I'm trying to make is that when a broker is involved in real estate, they have a unique understanding of how that real estate functions. Like they're doing it themselves. Like they've seen plumbing issues, they've seen roof issues, there's leaks, there's this, there's that. They understand how, when you're taking on a new building, how to interact with tenants, how to not interact with tenants. So I think that it's still a sore spot. Like, I think there are some brokerage agencies in Maine that try and, encourage their brokers not to invest in commercial real estate because of that, but I think each person has to make that decision for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine for some, it's you see all the things that can go wrong. So it's like, I will never do it myself.
Right.
And then for others, it's like, oh, I know everything that would entail. So
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah.
And for you, what do you think it was for you? Was like, was it from the beginning, I want to have, my own place and stuff like this? Or was there a specific moment that kind of
Yeah.
changed it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, growing up, my dad, he actually bought the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, which is an interesting thing, and a lot of real estate folks point to that book as like the turning point. And so, I was like really too young for that book, but I read some of it and started internalizing that early. My dad bought a multi and still has it actually. But it never became sort of like his thing. He's in construction himself, so he knows how to fix things, but when it's your own thing, it's a little bit different. So I think I always knew that real estate was a path to building wealth and that it was important for me to own real estate at some point, but it's really hard to do. And that's part of the reason why I kept my job a little too long, because I knew I needed it to qualify for a loan. And that switch, I mean, that's, I think, huge. It's a huge issue for a lot of entrepreneurs. Like having consistent income in order to qualify for a bank loan is one of, you have to at least have 2 years under your belt of consistent income for a banker to really consider you legitimate enough for a loan, which is frustrating because, I think well, certainly in my case, I made different decisions because of that. I'm happy about them, but it was a tough call. It was tough to stay longer than I should have, because this was my ultimate goal. So, yeah. And I mean, I think real estate was always going to be in my life for that reason. I just, again, it was hard to make it happen. And frankly, it's getting harder. So,
Yeah. And now I want to pivot to Union and Co.
yeah.
Going from that, I mean, how did that basically come to be? And was it when you made the decision you wanted to like get in the game, was it just because there was a cool property and then let me do something with this? Was it always, you had the experience with the co-working, you didn't want to work at home yourself? Was it always a co-working, I'll figure it out? Kind of what was the start, and take us from there?
The start wasn't, I want to start a co-working space. It was really the people and the place. So in 2019, it was like January, February, a friend had reached out and I had done some consulting work on the side with them related to Build Maine. And she was like, hey, come with me to Bath and we're going to take a tour of this building. And, do you want to start a co-working space? And I was like, I don't know, maybe. But let's do it. So that was my first time in Bath ever, January 2019. And, I'd grown up like going south and going west and, not going north in Maine really. And so I just never made it here. And from the moment I got here, I was like, wow, this is a very unique place. And the density of the downtown, the fact that it retained its historic fabric and the beautiful brick buildings, it felt like a little bit fairy tale like, which is, you just don't see that kind of thing all the time. And so I was a little taken aback in a good way. And then I met Sean. So Sean owned the building that we were looking at, this space, and he had just bought the building, and it's 18,000 square feet and had a lot of tenants, and was trying to figure out how to pivot some of the spaces that were vacant. And so we took a tour of the building, we took a tour of the downtown, and I was like, okay, I'm in. Like this, I'm just sold on this place and this idea, and starting a co-working space in a community that I think is very cool. I'm not sure if it's going to be successful, but why not? I had a little bit of money, a little bit, I stress. And I was like, I'm ready to throw it down. Let's go. Which was, I think, pretty unlike me generally. Like, it's not like I was super risk averse, but that was probably the biggest risk that I had taken thus far.
And why did you do it?
Man, I just started believing in the vision. Sean has a way of really painting a picture of how it could help the community and really change things and be a catalyst really for other things. And that was always the idea behind the co-working space. It wasn't necessarily just building a business or building the space. It was, how can we as the co-founders work together in the future? So it was 5 of us, and 5 is too many, but we learned that later. That started the co-working space, and we put in 5,000, which became 8,000 each, because projects, and the space was 1,100 square feet on the 3rd floor, and we had a series of demo weekends. So we were going to put in sweat equity to get the space ready, and we were going to try to do it from February to May. And we had 1.5 people working on it quasi full-time, but I had a full-time job. I was living in Portland, so I was reverse commuting to Bath, and I was also taking my real estate course at that time. And so one day a weekend was real estate and one day a weekend was demo. And so it was a busy spring. But ultimately, the 5 of us just busted it out, and pulling carpet off of stairs and painting, which I am not very good at, but and selecting furniture, really finding furniture that was being thrown away somewhere, and making it work on a budget with a group of people that were newly working together. And so we opened May 6th of 2019 and had a series of open houses. We moved a desk down to the 1st floor because we were on the 3rd floor. Nobody knew about us. Our only marketing was social media and good old fashioned networking. And, our first member or the first people in our space were like, I don't need a co-working space. I don't work with anyone. Why would I need to work in a co-working space? Actually, several of our first members were older women writers, which was an interesting demographic that I didn't expect for the 3rd floor space. And it was great. I mean, people were looking for a space outside their home that was quiet and focused and unlike anything else really in Bath. And so, we had our first members, one of which is Jay Kavanaugh, who I'm sure we'll hear from at some point. They were just people who wanted to see something different and wanted to be a part of something different. And slowly but surely, we got a few members, but it was pre-COVID and, people weren't working from home. And basically, we had to put up or shut up. We were not making any money. We were actively losing money, and we weren't paying rent to Sean. So, because it was just this one space, right? And then slowly, as tenants started to leave the building, their lease was up, they moved on. We started taking over more space in the building. But that was a real catalyst point for our 5 founding members. And, life happened. And it just became difficult for people to do the business operationally. It was fine to do those sweat equity weekends and make it happen and build something, but actually running the business, was a little bit challenging, particularly with a group of 5. So slowly but surely, Sean and I were the only 2 left at the table. And that was around February of 2020. So COVID hit, and, we lost the very few members that we had. And it was just Sean and I up there just hanging out, trying to figure out what it meant for the next phase. And we had just brought 4 private offices online, and we were about to bring 4 more online. And then we started getting calls. Calls from, private equity guy from New York who's moving to his place in Georgetown and needs an office for the summer. A lawyer from Boston, same thing. Someone from Australia who was visiting is basically stuck here. These people that, we had never seen in our co-working space before, but needed someplace to work. And at the time, there was no internet on any of the peninsulas surrounding Bath. The internet was so poor, and there was just like nothing you could do about it, particularly when there were other people using the internet. And it became untenable for these people. So in order for the world to keep functioning, they needed to work. And we provided that space. And it was a small crew, of course, social distancing, everybody had their own office, and we just kind of kept moving on.
Can I ask, because we talked a little bit about it sounds like you went from the 5 co-founders to the 2, and I'm sure that was difficult in its own. Mm-hmm. And you had the difficult periods of what is this going to be? Mm-hmm. And then COVID hits. And it sounds like then you got some members, but I mean, I'm early into the entrepreneurship game. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, at least for me, it's very vast majority is mental.
Yeah. How
did you guys stick through it mentally kind of during that time? And how close did you actually get maybe to, I don't know about this, let's sell, let's cut our losses?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that one of our founding members always said is if it fails, we had an office together, us working together, and hopefully good things will come of it. And, it hasn't failed, and good things have come of it. And so, but that was, those moments were difficult because ultimately, people say this all the time, business partners are like marriages, and there are really difficult conversations that have to happen, and there were, and it was hard, and there's a lot of trust that you have to have in your business partners in order to make it work. But ultimately, I believed that. I saw my colleagues in the UK, they could work from home, they could work from elsewhere. And I knew I didn't know it was coming quite to the extent that it came. But, I believed in the community that we were building, however small. And I wanted to see that through. If we had closed in February of 2020, that would have been less than a year. And I was just not okay with that. Particularly given the idea of expansion. Sometimes you have to grow in order to not die. And that was us,
Which is very scary.
Very
I feel
scary.
To go further into something that is on
not
the edge.
making money. Yeah.
How do you get over that for yourself?
Oh, part of it was I'd invested a lot of time and money, and in order to see it come back, I needed to put more time and money into it. And, part of this too is all wrapped up in, basically Sean and I went from business partners to life partners and still business partners. And so I would be remiss if I didn't say that, part of our sticking together was more than just the business too. It was a way to retain that connection, and then build and grow that. So, yeah, I hate to say this because I know it was a difficult time, but that COVID summer was really fun for Sean and I. Because we were just outside and basically knew love, and it was great. And it was also difficult, but it was. It was, I can't not think of, the business and our relationship and all of it sort of meshed together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was, I'm sure, the blessing and a curse. Like,
Yeah.
probably at first, like, well, shit, like,
Yeah.
we,
What are we going to
we
do?
just, worked through this. And now, how does a co-working space stay in business when you have to social distance?
Right.
But then it brings this wave of remote working.
And it just kept coming, so that summer, pre-vaccine, people were very tentative to come back into a space. But once the vaccine, I think that was like May of 2021 when people started, really sort of getting the vaccine and coming back out and feeling safer in public spaces. Like we saw, we were just like, I literally had to put people in hallways. Like we did not have enough space for people. And we're in a historic building with, no central air conditioning and very little ventilation and, big old windows, but that's about it. And we just made it work, and people were grateful to have the space to work and to extend their time in Maine, to like be able to be with their family all summer in a place that they love. And continue to do, what they needed to do professionally. And that still gives me a lot of joy, that really, those couple of summers post-COVID, Maine was a destination. Like it felt like there was just like more people than we could handle, from the co-working space, but also the state. Like it was just, people wanted to be outside, and Maine was a great place to do that, but also have access to great food in Portland and, river, mountains, ocean. Like it's just kind of the full package. So we were really there for it, and didn't expect it, but we certainly welcomed it. Yeah. And, summers have been different, but one of the things that I love is that I'm still getting the same people that we had those first few years. Call, email, write, and say, hey, do you have an office this summer? I'll be back this date. Sometimes it's the same date. Sometimes they're here for 2 months. Sometimes they're only here for a week, but it's good to see those faces again. People just keep coming back because it fits with their schedule and it fits with their life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think with the new wave of remote work, so many people going remote. I myself, right, and that was a big turning point because it unlocked the way I wanted to live life. I was able to become a digital nomad. And the first couple months I was with my best friend. So we were just, working from the house. And then once he left, I knew I needed to probably do something to socialize. And I joined a co-working space. And that like forever changed my life. And it became basically non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So when I traveled somewhere, it has to have a co-working space because I need it just for the separation of space. I go crazy if I do everything in one room, 2 rooms. The connection, even if I don't talk to somebody, just there's a conversation over there.
Right.
Like I kind of like that I could.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when I was solo traveling, though, I actually would. That was how I met 90% of the people when I traveled. And so us coming here, we came to Portland first for a couple months. Didn't love Portland, but we're always escaping to the mid-coast. And then last year was looking at a spot on the mid-coast. And the reason we kind of honed in on Bath was because, they have a co-working space. And we had lucky, I was just telling you about the fiasco of trying to find a place here in the mid-coast. We got lucky. We got a place walking distance. And I love the spot. It was a fortunate timing last year when I went. Then that was a time where I was like laid off as well. So then I didn't go last year, but I knew in returning, I was going to be coming all the time. And it's the importance of like the third spaces has just blown up.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, still haven't realized it. My former company, engineering firm, we got to about 80+% remote. And I think I was pretty much the only one at the company that was using a co-working space.
Yeah.
And I would always tell people about it. And there's always this friction to get out of the house because it's an extra expense, yada, yada. but I would really implore people to give it a shot. Even if you go one day a month,
Right.
one day a week, it will change your experience. You're going to start to just meet other people in your community that are on similar schedules to you and all of this stuff. One of my favorite things is in that first co-working space, I just remember like taking off the headphones all the time and listening, because coming from an engineering office, the conversations were so different. Like at this co-working space, I remember there was a guy that headed a marketing agency, and then he was talking about this guy that did like fitness coaching or something like that. And then there was a beauty makeup artist person that did online stuff. So they would talk and share expertise. And I was just like, whoa, these are very new conversations I've never heard of.
Right.
And so that really changed it for me. So I was really glad, like I said, when it came, that we have Union and Co. It's such a beautiful spot. For you, like, what was the original idea and like vision for the space? Because you guys do a lot of unique things, I think, as well. It is very community focused. Was that, from the get-go?
That was, from the get-go. It was meant to be a place where economic and community development is borne out, we can actually see it happening there. So Sean's background is, in commercial real estate, but also is owned real estate for a really long time. And before that, he was in academia. And my background, research, but really what I love about the space is connecting people to other resources, connecting people to other people. And those are the situations that I sort of get the most pride and feelings about is like watching either people that I've connected, grow their relationship. Some really, people moved to Bath during COVID, and I know that their friend group has been born out of, the connections made at Union and Co. But the economic and community development element was always a key focus for us, is really bringing people together, because when people come together, you can get stuff done. And you don't know what stuff maybe yet, but it's really important to actually have people in the same room hearing those different conversations, thinking about ways that they can do things differently, or, unique sort of next projects and ideas happening and connections and, it's business development in some cases, but in other cases, it's just having people connect with one another and seeing them flourish in whatever realm that is. And that was, again, the joke was always well, if it fails, we'll have an office. But really, we didn't expect this level of success. And, and I say this level of success, I don't really mean financially. It's not a big business by any means, but it looks bigger than it is, which is great. But, I think people have a different sense of how much money it makes. It's really about the other things that happen in the space. I hope that people don't think I'm just working on Union and Co stuff all day, every day, because good God, we would hopefully be in a better position. But, I think for me, it's been a business development tool that I didn't see coming. I've helped from a commercial and residential real estate perspective. I've helped members go on to do new and better things and bigger things and, finding a new office and having that 2.0 space. It's not meant to be an end all be all for people. We want you to grow and leave and find, your own space and do your own thing. And, we like to help along the way.
How much coffee does a co-working space go through a month?
It's a good question. Not as much as you'd expect, probably because we're right next to Solo Pane, which I literally make the coffee in the morning at Union & Co. And then I go next door and get my own coffee, which I'm admitting to the world right now, but I love their coffee. Our coffee is great too. It's Lay Day out of Portland, Maine, and a colleague that I used to work with. It's his entrepreneurial side gig, which I love. I mean, 5 pounds a month, probably.
Yeah,
Not
not
too
terrible.
bad. Yeah.
Not terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's such a cornerstone of the community. I feel like you walk over, you get the smells of Solapane,
Yeah.
which is hard to just walk by. You come in and then you see it's such a bright area to open with.
Yeah.
You see everybody kind of chatting in their own thing.
It's so interesting. So that's their second space, right? Our first space was in a building like 400 yards away on the third floor. And slowly we expanded from 1,100 square feet to 6,000 square feet and had art studio space. And then, we started just not being able to fit all the people that were inquiring. And so we started looking at other buildings in downtown Bath. And this one kept sort of coming up. It's kind of a white elephant situation. 4,000 square feet. It used to be a department store. And it had been vacant at that time for 10 years in the middle of the downtown. So our business is real estate and development, and she bought the building and started a renovation project. And that was in 2021. Essentially took us a year to demo the inside of the building. And also prepare our, applications for historic tax credits, which is one of the only ways that these historic buildings can actually pencil, from a redevelopment perspective. Lots of different sort of injections in that capital stack, grants, loans. It was a heavy lift, and Sean, my partner, did all of the general contracting himself. And that was also a heavy lift. We think back on those years and it felt like it was dark and dusty most of the time. In a big rambling building, we had 5 kitchens in that building. We have 4 commercial spaces, 4 apartments. Like there was just a lot of things that needed to be organized, which was my responsibility, and physically done, which was Sean's responsibility. And so, I feel like that project nearly broke us, but wow, it's done. And, we gave probably like 400 people tours, I think, throughout the course of the building redevelopment. We gave tours to anyone who came in the door, whether we were working or not. And we had specific tours every Friday. But we also would just we had a concert series in the back parking lot, and I have photos of, the new window holes cut in the building, but no windows in them yet. It was very rough, and is also, we're climbing back out of COVID. So there were supply chain issues with the materials, and things were just astronomically expensive. But this project would not have happened, but for doing it ourselves. We were quoted $5-6 million and ended up doing it for $3 million. And so thankfully it's done. We had a lot of community support, and we had a lot of support of our neighbors, and, a lot of patience. And it really, when we used to give some tours, and people, I think they just thought, Sean particularly and me were just crazy. How do you see this vision of, painted a picture, but until you actually walk in and see the space and feel the volume of it, it's, I don't think it really sunk in for people until that, ribbon cutting in September 2023. So yeah, it was tough. And, buildings are, again, like people, they just require a lot of work.
Yeah, and I watched a video last night. You had sent a little bit about what it was before and kind of the coming to be. So I'll put that in the show notes. I'd implore people to watch that. Because actually, I didn't know, and the other week I was across the street and I was like, why does it have the department store thing still there?
Yeah.
So now it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
One thing that I think at least from the outside, that you guys seem to do well is there's a lot of different like unique things you do with the space, and maybe streams of income as well that you have out of it.
Maybe.
Is there something that you guys do that's especially unique? I mean, I have a couple in mind, but I'd love to hear like what you think.
I mean, that central tenet of economic and community development and arts and culture really were the things that guided us and how we knew we needed to create an actual community. Like you can walk into a co-working space that's totally empty. And there are some more corporate spaces that, you know, we all know. And there's a feeling that like it's just a space. But that was not at all our intention. Our intention was to create a community and around a space. And so with that, we have consistently, I don't know how many we've actually done at this point, but we have monthly lunch and learns on a range of topics, like, you know, anything from like, we had a city update that was like 55 people last month. We've done like solar energy, you know, if you want to put solar in your house, what do you do? We have one on ecotourism next week. So these lunch and learns are an opportunity for the community to come in. Like, funnily enough, not very many members attend, but you know, again, it's that idea that it's there and you can attend if you want. We just started actually a monthly business owner and entrepreneur meetup group, and so, you know, slowly gaining traction, but called the Wind Tunnel after a group of old guys that meet in Phippsburg every morning. You know, it's just a chance for people to connect with one another, really just talk about the things and struggles that they're going through.
Yeah, which is big. I was there the other week. I love just meeting other entrepreneurs, and especially now that I'm in the world and making this the home base. That's really important. The other one that came to mind that you guys do is like, what is it, monthly features of artists and stuff like that, where I was talking with the one the other day that was taking hers down. I think she's going to be coming to the podcast actually.
Oh, good.
And, but yeah, you have like art on the wall from local artists, and it's cool because then they get to showcase their art, but then, you know, you guys have this beautiful art as well on the wall. It feels like a win-win there.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's an interesting thing. We did not intend for that to happen. You know, we, throughout the redevelopment of the building, we had a local photographer and friend, Joshua Longley. He documented not only the actual like construction happening at the time, but the people who were doing the work. And this is sort of, I hope at some point we can get this back on the wall or in a gallery somewhere, because it's really unique. Joshua is really a photojournalist at heart, and his work he did a project in Bend, Oregon, and then sort of kind of replicated that model here with the people who were doing the work. So plumbers and electricians and engineers and, the high school kid that installed the tin ceiling, like the mason who cut all the window openings and, jackhammered like the back door. All of these people have such unique stories. And so he took their portrait, and along with that, did an interview with each person. And the portraits are stunning, and the interviews are just so unique and funny and sad, and just so many emotions along with those. And, to think that was happening at one of the more stressful points in our lives to this point, it just makes it really memorializes that project. And so I don't even remember what we're talking about. Oh, the art wall. So, we hung Joshua's photos and had that exhibition first. And then we're like, wow, like really like this. And we should probably keep doing this. So now we offer an opportunity for artists to actually have that showcase. And the next one's coming up on the 19th. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So a lot of people who listen to this podcast, I would put most of them in like two categories, right? The first is what I call Dirt Path curious. Mm-hmm. So those are people who maybe are on like the highway of life. They're in an unlined 9 to 5 or unlined lifestyle, and they're kind of just trudging along.
Yeah.
But they know it's not for them. So they want to take the leap on doing something like creating a co-working space or something like that. I think co-working spaces have become, like, especially abroad, and I'm, in a little bit of a bubble of the co-working spaces. I always go to them, but creating that kind of sense of community in a place is a bit more popular now. I think people realize it.
Yeah.
So if somebody out there is thinking about creating a space like this for themselves, what's the thing that they're not thinking about that they need to consider?
Oh, I would talk to another co-working space nearby first. Like, just go talk to people first, and they'll probably say, don't do it because it's a lot of work and not a lot of money. But the point is, like, talk to the people who are doing what you're doing and you'll gain some insight. Don't let them scare you. Just use that information. And one thing that I've learned about co-working space owners is that they're very forthcoming and with pretty much whomever is willing to have a conversation, give you a tour of their space, talk about the things that they struggle with, talk about, how you can do things better. And I've really enjoyed that community in Maine, in particular, with the Maine co-working space owners. The state actually, through a series of grants, has done a really pretty good job of connecting us. And then, we foster those connections. So we had a series of meetups, which we should restart, of like co-working space owners and just getting together and like touring one space in Portland and touring our space in Bath. And, I really have enjoyed that camaraderie. So that's my biggest piece of advice, is just to go talk to people first, again, and don't let them scare you. You'll figure it out. But also own the real estate. It's my next big piece. You'll figure out why, but own the real estate.
Yeah. On the flip side, somebody's out there working from home. Why should they consider a co-working space?
It is really dependent on the person, but I think most humans are social creatures, whether or not they think they are. And that's the reason. You got to get out of your house. You got to get out of your bubble. And the only way to sort of continue to learn and grow as a person is to be around other people, in my opinion. I think far too much we're like sucked into the vortex of our computers and, online world. And like, this is an opportunity for, of course, like you have your work, you have to do it, and it involves a computer. But a co-working space is an opportunity to actually like make connections, make eye contact, like talk to someone who's not on a screen, and, feel body language and like get those cues and really like connect with people. That's the most important thing about a co-working space to me. And, I just am reflecting because, and I'm probably going to break down, but our, one of the 5 co-founders of Union & Co. just recently passed away. And he was always the one who said, if it fails, we still have an office together. And it's the connections that you make in these places that supersede the place and the space. And it's just, had I not sort of taken the leap with Union & Co., I wouldn't have known this person.
Was it Greg?
Frank. Yeah.
I think I saw an email today about it. What was something, I know you said that one quote. Is there anything else that you remember from Frank during the process?
So many things. So many Frankisms. He was a Michigan grad, and so always brought his Michigan Business School knowledge to every conversation. But the thing I think that is most impactful for, your listeners in part, that's a Frankism, is when you're getting into a project, it's not just about getting in. You have to know how you're going to get in. know how you're going to stay in, your operation, and know how you're going to get out, because that exit is just as important as getting in. And so, that can go from the smallest of interactions to like the biggest of businesses, but know how you're going to get in, know how you're going to stay in, and then know how you're going to get out.
Beautiful. Wishing Frank's family well and everything, and thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Mandy, so much for coming on. It's been really, really cool. There's a lot more questions that I want to ask. There's so much to you. We didn't get into, how you balance. You said you like to do a lot of stuff. That's very true. But you still do the real estate. You do stuff like the city council and are pretty active within the city, which I know. But I appreciate you.
Thankfully I'm not on city council, but I do attend a fair amount of meetings. We have a lot of projects and things going on. And I encourage everyone to get involved civically, whatever that means for them. So many committees and so many opportunities to again, meet people within your community who care a lot. So, big proponent of civic duty.
Yeah. I think for the first time now that we're kind of calling this our home, at least for half the year, I do want to start to be more involved and just get more in the community. Where can people go to connect with you? We'll put it all in the show notes, but where's the best place for that?
Yeah, I think Union & Co. is where I do the most communicating. LinkedIn's always good too, but Union & Co.'s website is kind of our really first port of call. We're active on social media. Quasi-active, got a lot of things going. So
yeah. We'll put that all in the show notes for everybody. I have a last question for you, which is why the dirt path? So in today's conversation, we've kind of gone through your dirt path as I see it, right? You decided to open a space, a physical space, after kind of being someone in the industry and get your skin in the game on your own and take that leap. Through a lot of different challenges, I have decided to keep going. You still do the real estate annex side, which is kind of dirt path as well, because you're kind of, making it happen for yourself there. You also do a lot of stuff in the city. It's a lot of things that I don't think many people do. And because of that, it's very difficult. There's no manual.
Yeah.
You're just figuring out as it goes on. And we talked a little bit about the difficult moments. I'm sure there's a lot more that we did not get into, and each day is a bit of a battle. So knowing the fact that it's hard and slow and how it becomes maybe what you want it to be, why do it? Why the dirt path for you?
I think it provides an opportunity to stay curious. That's always been something that gets me into, I would say trouble, but good trouble, probably bad trouble too. But curiosity, I don't think you can understate the importance of that as you continue to get older too. It's humbling, and it's the sort of jumping off point of learning. I also think, and this might be a little more controversial, but we talk a lot about, in this day and age, it feels about time, valuing time. And frankly, if you start valuing your time, you put a monetary number to it, you say this is worth it, but that's not. I think that's the wrong conversation. It should really be developing relationships, and relationships take time. And, you might put a lot of time into something that doesn't make you any money, and that's okay. And we just need to shift that conversation away from, yeah, I value my time, so I'm not going to do this, to I'm curious about it. Let's see how it goes, So yeah, I think that's about it.
Beautiful. Mandy, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Time to go back to the co-work and get into some good trouble maybe.
Yeah, really.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Dirt Path podcast. You can find any links to support or follow today's Trailblazer in the description below. If you got this far and really liked today's episode, it would mean a lot if you could give us a 5 stars wherever you found this podcast. Subscribe and like on YouTube. And email us. Email us at thedirtpathpodcast@gmail.com to give us feedback, to give us an update of you on your own dirt path, or to send us questions, as we might be doing some Q&A episodes in the future. All right. We'll see you next time here on the Dirt Path.
Saw the exit sign flash by, a whisper in the breeze said, take a chance, don't wonder why, just follow where it leads. Oh, the dirt path, it ain't easy, no map to guide the way. Slow and hard, sometimes uneasy, you stumble through the clay. No signs to tell you where you're bound, no traffic to obey. But every step on broken ground builds something great someday.